Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. As part of Holy Trinity's celebration of Black Catholic History Month, we gathered this morning with our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ to begin to get to know each other better. Our panel today is part of an ongoing effort by Holy Trinity to address racism and its harm in our community and to move toward healing. You may find more about our activities and about the ministries of the restorative justice and racial justice and equity history on our website, listed under the Social Justice Committee. My name is Paul Mako, and I coordinate our history group and am a circle keeper in our restorative justice ministry. Joining us in alphabetical order are Bernard Cook, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of History at Loyola University; Ms. Dina Grant, Librarian at the Library of Congress; Parish Council and Black History Committee member and leader of the Sodality, and a Girl Scout leader at St. Augustine's Catholic Church in Washington, D.C. Ms. Linda Gray is chair of the Parish Council, a lector at Epiphany Catholic Church, and a direct descendant of Holy Trinity parishioners who founded Epiphany, and vice chair of the D.C. Democratic Party, and former high school biology teacher and principal. And of course, Father Ray Kemp, senior research fellow, special assistant to the president, adjunct professor, D.C. Community Fellow, Center for Social Justice at Georgetown University. All of our speakers this morning are members of our history group. Together with our group, we are discovering our past, acknowledging it, and working together toward our future. We and others in the group have accomplished much in the last 3 years. You may find the fruits of our labor on our website under Parish History. Holy Trinity was founded in 1787 by the same small group of priests who founded Georgetown College. As evidenced in our baptismal records, in addition to parishioners residing in Georgetown, Catholics at that time from Bladensburg to Great Falls in Maryland and from Alexandria to Dumfries in Virginia traveled difficult roads or sailed the Potomac to celebrate the sacraments at Holy Trinity. So not much has really changed, except that parishioners coming to Mass today contend with a variety of Sunday marathons instead of the fickle winds of the Potomac. Except for one big change. From Holy Trinity's beginning, our parish consisted of 1/3 of our parishioners were Black Catholics, some enslaved, some free. And that was pretty much the way until 1923, when our Black parishioners, tired of being confined to the balconies, of having to wait for the white people to receive communion in return for communion, and having more numbers in our parish than seats in the balcony for them to sit in, finally had enough and asked the bishop and received the permission to found Epiphany. That story is not unique to Holy Trinity, as we'll hear from Professor Vernon Cook. After the painful Jim Crow era and the parting of Black Catholics from predominantly white Catholic churches, as fellow members of the body of Christ, we Catholics have become strangers. Our isolation is not healthy, neither for us or for the larger community. Together as members of the body of Christ, we may better confront the polarization and hate that is spreading through our society today. We can begin by getting to know each other better, as we are all doing this morning. Father Ken?
Well, good morning.
Am I hearable? You can hear me?
Hearable.
That's good. We forgot Sybil Williams, thank you. She's a late add to this little race that we're gonna run here between now and 11:15. Sybil is a member of every parish. We'll let her talk for herself later. I think I'm here for one reason, the same reason you're here, except my introduction to this happened in 1967. I'll call it the grace of God. I don't usually appeal to the grace of God, but the grace of God landed me in St. Augustine's Parish in August of 1967, and I come from a family that has enough dealing with black and white in DC, a couple generations here. I won't go into all of that, but I end up at St. Augustine's, and I think I went to a seminary where Father Knows Best was being prepared, so I was Father Knows Best. I didn't know jack about what the whole racial thing was about, and frankly, it hasn't really come home to me like it has since Georgetown publicized its own history, with which I was familiar up here, but not here and in the gut. So the last 56 years for me have been the journey that you guys have been on, and I just want to commend the committee for digging, publicizing, bringing you guys into the picture. Other parishes have tried to own it. You're going to hear about some more parishes in a minute from which Black said, bye-bye. The only way we can do this is we got to do it on our own. And they had a patron in Baltimore who was the Archbishop, and his successors back in the day, you've heard of Gibbons. They kind of bought into the system. It was a segregated system, and they said Black folks are going to be better off in a segregated system in their own parishes. You can argue that back and forth. Integration comes, there's a whole history of that. I don't want to go there. I want to go where we, and I'd love you to think about it, how does Holy Trinity get to know Epiphany or St. Augustine's or the Black Catholic population in this city? And I think one of the ways we do it is grab hold of our history and own it, bring it to bear on understanding what's going on now, and where does it take us in terms of, this is a Jesuit parish still, right? Where does this take us in terms of mission? What are we going to do? I want to lead with this lady she's not just working at Epiphany, she is Epiphany. The question the committee asked is, what happened? Where did our Black parishioners go? They went and formed a Black parish, parallel to the other Jesuit parish a couple of years before, St. Aloysius, that went and formed another parish. That's Holy Redeemer. You know, Holy Redeemer in New York and New Jersey Avenue. Interesting thing, there is something in the Synoptic Gospels about the reversal. St. Aloysius is no longer a parish, and the parish happens to be the parish that the Black folks founded for themselves. So it's what goes around comes around. Is that no line? Yeah, so Holy Redeemer is doing great work. Pax Christi was there last night, and they're celebrating I guess 50th anniversary of David Baba next Sunday. It's a great place. Here's the Georgetown version of Holy Redeemer. I mean, yes, and that's it. Tell them a little. You got a mic.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First of all, I'm so very happy to be here, and you know, he's really telling his age because Dina and I were kids when we were going to St. Augustine.
Oh my God.
And Father kept us there, so.
It's okay.
Well, I am from Epiphany. I'm very proud to say that I am a member of Epiphany Church. My grandmother was a founding member. She was baptized in Holy Trinity, so was her mother. I think her father was Methodist. But anyway, at the beginning, when the parishioners decided to leave. I don't know what the exact moment was, this is it, we're never coming back, but when they decided to leave, they never looked back. They had mass in all kinds of places. On the corner of 28th and Dumbarton Avenue, there was a beauty salon, and adjacent to that was actually Jarvis Funeral Home. Well, Miss Eleanor Jackson, who I do remember as a child, owned the beauty salon. They had mass in the beauty salons, they had mass in parishioners' homes, they had mass anywhere they could have it. And we're talking, I don't know how they managed it, but 600 people left Holy Trinity. And 600 people, and I'm saying families, not 600 adults, but with children, families, laid the cornerstone in 1925 for Epiphany Catholic Church. It was a strong parish. There was no such thing in those days as ministries. There were no salaries. They were so happy to have a place of their own where they were free to do whatever they wanted to do and how they wanted to worship, that there was an altar guild. There was a fabulous choir. There was Sunday school. There was the Ladies of Charity. There was Sodality. There was everything, 600 strong. And they did it just for the love of the church. And the mortgage was paid for by bingo, which wasn't considered gambling back then. But through bingo and retreats and big dinners, and I mean, they did all kinds of things. And the bazaar, which the Sodality really sponsored, and it was extremely successful. In 1954, we got the first black priest that had ever been assigned to a parish in Washington, D.C., and that was Father Ball. I personally don't remember Father Ball, but I know he married my parents and he baptized me. He left, I don't know the exact year, but in the very early 60s. And by the way, our parish, we had Josephites. And then we got our first diocesan priest. Okay. And things changed. Unfortunately, history tends to repeat itself. Unfortunately, there was a priest, and he baptized my brother too, that announced to the congregation that he wanted them to go to churches that were in their own neighborhoods, because he was not accustomed to being around so many colored people. Now, you have to remember, in the early 60s, things started happening in Georgetown, period. I mean, there were still plenty of black people that lived here. I lived here, my grandparents lived here. But people were moving out. Integration, they were moving into different neighborhoods. But if you didn't live in the neighborhood, he didn't want you there. And it cost us greatly, because we had an organist by the name of May Smith, and she and some of the family members of the Smackham family, and a lot of folks just upped and left. And we never had a choir like that since, because when I say we had a choir, we had a choir that, people would come from everywhere to hear them sing, particularly at a midnight mass, a hallelujah chorus. And they would go around the neighborhood during Christmas. They were caroling, and this choir was fabulous. Every organization we had at the church was fabulous and effective and hardworking. And that was the end. They weren't taking it anymore. And Epiphany has not, that true sense of church family, that has been lost forever. Now, I think that if you ask people who attend Epiphany right now, who don't look like me, they wouldn't agree with you. They would not agree with you. But they don't have anything to compare that to. I do. And right now, on a regular basis, there are only 2 black people who come to that church on a regular basis, and that's me and my mother. My mother just turned 91 years old. She has the oldest membership in the church. She was baptized at Epiphany in 1932. I was baptized in 1955. I think I had the second oldest membership. Now I'm not the second oldest, but I think, but I think if we looked into the records, I probably have the second oldest membership. It's a different face, a very different face. And I've experienced things because as folks come in, I mean, I can say I get the look, and you might know what that look is, but I know what that look is when people walk in church for the first time and think it's very strange to see me and my mother at church. And then not too long ago, we got our second black priest, Father Mosley, Monsignor Mosley, who I loved dearly. I really did. He is the priest that made sure we had the plaque put on the church, recognizing the efforts of African Americans who established that church, and we did that in 2016. Monsignor Mosley was great, and truly, most people loved him, but I even saw people treat him differently, or so they tried. He even had a personality to take that foolishness. But I saw instances where people actually thought they should tell him what to preach, and that was a mistake. That was a big mistake on their part. But he was so good for the parish, and unfortunately, he became ill and he passed. But my church is nothing like the church I grew up in. It doesn't feel like the church I grew up in. And part of my stress, because I was telling you, I'm at the height of my stress level, is because I try to do a lot of things purposely to build a church community. And I chair the hospitality and the events committee, and I do it every first Sunday. I have a small committee, and I try to, really keep them active, but it is effective, but it's not strong because we don't have the same type of parishioners. I can come to church every Sunday and see people I've never seen before, and the next week it'll be a whole new group. It just doesn't have that church community. We now have a new priest, a new pastor, Father Stefan. And I think he's feeling very comfortable now that he's been named the pastor. He was the administrator for 2 years, and that, kind of keeps you in limbo because you don't know what's going to happen to you. And I know that he is really trying. So pray for us, pray for me. I'm not leaving my church. My mother is the reason. She said, nobody's ever running me out of my church. And she says, and as long as I'm breathing, I will let them know. And she does. She really does if they ask. And so, because of her, I have that same attitude. There were times when I thought about, I need to go to St. Augustine because that's where I went to school. And I did go there once, and I met one of my classmates, Fran Thomas. She came out of that choir and saw me one day, and she said, girl, you need to come on home, And I never forgot her saying that to me. I never forgot that. But Epiphany is where I was baptized. It is the church where most of my family was baptized. It's where my grandmother worked so hard. And I don't want to leave because I just recently learned what my grandmother went through prior to leaving Holy Trinity. My grandmother was a pillar at Epiphany. She was the prefect of the Sodality for years. She chaired the ladies of charity. She sponsored kids for camp every year. I mean, she was a pillar. Plus, she and my grandfather raised 11 children at Epiphany. And I mean, between my grandmother's family and the Marshall's family, a couple other families, we filled the church up quite a bit. But they all stayed at Epiphany, and then, of course, some of them left us. They grew up and moved on.
Can I ask Paul to wave that black Georgetown? Just wave it. I brought a few books from my library. You all know this book? You gotta know this book. If you haven't read it, please find it. It's the anniversary edition. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the anniversary edition, they added a chapter. My mother, my mother, and a few other people were interviewed because the first book missed a lot of black families.
Hello.
A lot of black families. And so they did an interview and there's an added chapter there. So I'll stop here and I am gonna have to leave and I apologize because you know
Because you're doing coffee and donut.
No, I'm not just doing coffee and donuts. I got mulled wine in the car, so. we have, and I provide the jazz. So, you know, I'm gonna stay as long as I can, but if I leave, it's not because I want to. I have to.
Think about how Trinity parishioners could get to know the Epiphany parishioners who left Epiphany. Aren't you trying to bring them back for our 100th anniversary?
We are.
Can we help? Can Trinity help in that? That's what I want to get to.
Oh, yes.
Say something about your anniversaries next
It's
year.
2025 is the 100th anniversary, so you know it's gonna, you know what they did, only you could chair the committee, so I am gonna serve as chair of that committee. But I would love to have a slew of activities for the year to commemorate everything that we've been through, where we've come from, what we've done, where we stand. And I would love for Trinity to be involved in that because, I mean, we moved from Trinity. Epiphany was as strong as it ever could be because they left and did something really powerful for themselves. So I would really love for you to be involved, and I will be asking you.
I want Trinity to think about too what they could do, right? As part of the 100th anniversary. I'm thinking this is all a little bit of what we heard this morning in the readings, right? How do you put these readings to work? How do you renew a covenant that has been broken? How do you bring things back? How do you serve one another? How do you reconstitute things? There is another parish that preceded that parish, and they broke away from a church that was St. Matthew's. And St. Matthew's is where that stone crab place is. Joe's, you know where Joe's is? The old bank on the corner of 15th and H Northwest. Can you picture it? You could get there. People from Georgetown went to St. Matthew's. The story of St. Augustine's begins with St. Matthew's Church and the past. Actually, there were families as ready to go as your parish families were in 1920s. Tell a history.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us, and thank you, Holy Trinity History Group. Someone asked me, how did you get involved with them? I said, I don't remember. It had started during the pandemic. I said, but I know Father Kemp was the connector, because Father Kemp called one day and said he was working on the Georgetown 272 project. Where did the people who founded St. Augustine's come from? We had a large community of free blacks. We had some who were still slaves, and they brought their family history. So Father Kemp asked me to find out where they came from. So then I brought Sybil in, because Sybil is a genealogist, and she has done a yeoman's job of connecting, raise your hand, connecting everybody. We called our group the SA, copying off of Georgetown, 91, and Sybil said, no, it's 91 plus. We could document 91 founding members going back to 1858. But Sybil has gone and taken out. At that time, ladies, we were known as Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones. So she's gone through and found out who Mrs. Smith was and who Mrs. Jones was. And oh, by the way, they had 12 children in the household. That was 1858. You know, they had all the children came to church. It wasn't like some of us do now. No, I don't feel like going to mass today. So thank you, Sybil, who's given us life. St. Augustine, we trace our roots to the basement of St. Matthew's Church, which was still a church, and it didn't become a cathedral until 1939. And it was right around 15th and H near the Treasury Department. It moved to that location where they are now in 1939 when they got cathedral status. We founded the second oldest continually operating school in the District of Columbia after your Holy Trinity in 1858. But more importantly, we've been breathing life into who these names are that are on the rolls. And I have to again thank Sybil, because Sybil has found out that a number of people came from Holy Trinity and they came over as founded St. Augustine. And I want to lift up their names today. Joseph Jackson and his family, he had 10 children. He left Trinity and came over to St. Augustine. Ada Cole, John and Mary Cole. The Dodsons, you know, a lot of the Dodsons at Holy Trinity Epiphany, some of the Dodsons came over to St. Augustine. So if I forget anybody, help me.
One of the Dodsons, Mrs. Walker's still there now.
Mrs.
Still
Walker,
alive now.
Mrs. the Walker family, Thomas Bowie came. Jane Hall and Mary Gray, they're founding members of the Smallwood family, left Holy Trinity and came to found St. Augustine. Henry Warren, who lived at that time to be 106 years old, came over. A lot of these people founded St. Augustine Choir. The choir had an offshoot to raise money when we decided we got to come up out of the basement, build a church. We founded the first colored opera company in the United States. So a lot of these members founded the opera company. Hold on, I need my glasses these days. John West, Mary Harrison, a lot of these people who are our backbone people came out of Holy Trinity. So I'm just grateful that you all today, St. Augustine is celebrating this year 165 years. We've survived 3 moves up 15th Street from 15th and L. We were first a chapel. Blessed Martin Porres Chapel in school, and we just had the feast day of Blessed Martin Porres the other day. We moved over to 15th and M with the site of the old Washington Post bus. We then later moved up to 15th and S to the basement of the school, and now we merged in 1961 with the parish of St. Paul's. So we're at 15th and V. In 1981, talk was saying, we need to reclaim the name of St. Augustine. So we petitioned the Archdiocese and we became the parish of St. Augustine, because when Linda and I went to school, it was St. Paul and Augustine School. We were SSPA, and one of our older parishioners, we would say St. Paul because it was the first in the list of the names. And she says, no, you all are forgetting about St. Augustine. So I have to give kudos to the older people at St. Augustine throughout the ups and downs and say, no, we got to reclaim our history. And Sybil tells the story where her son, was your son or daughter, both of them said, oh, those ladies in the sodality talk about the history again. But the voices were out there, the memories was out there, and it's taken root, and it's continuing to grow. I have said, you know, we've gone through the pandemic, we've gone through graduations, birthdays, COVID together. We are more alike than we are different. We are a big circle of people. Holy Trinity, Epiphany, St. Paul and Augustine School, Father Kemp, all of us. And I thank you for opening up the doors so we can come together and dialogue and be family. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Good one. 2 minutes, just because you did this stuff. I'm gonna get Bernie next. But you got family, you got flesh and blood when you do that genealogy. What are you thinking this morning? 2 minutes.
Yeah,
You gotta speak right into that mic.
when we had this official list of the names, I didn't realize how connected the people were. They all knew each other because a lot of them worked together. They worked down at the government printing office together. They worked, they got a lot of government. You must remember, after they fought in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, they got government jobs because they were Republicans, because civil service was political at the time. And a lot of them were messengers. They did all the manual going around and lifting and stuff. But after they did that, they did side stuff. One guy was a barber in Congress, and he sold lunches to the congressional people, and that's how he made extra money. All this extra money went into the church. And any extra money, but I say extra because that they didn't need sustained living. They poured into the church. They formed so many, I have to get a list of all the age groups, the society groups. They even had a young children of marriage group. All these groups that they formed to help one another, and they helped each other. They made sure that they were buried. They made sure that the women, that they had wills, so that a lot of the men did wills so their wife could inherit property at that time. The founder, John West, that we're going to, we would call him a subcontractor now. They call, in the DC directory, he's listed as a plaster. Well, he got into the real estate building, and he owned, by the time he died in his will, he owned 4 houses on 6th Street. And in his will, his wife was gonna live in one of the houses. One of the houses, she was supposed to rent out so she could have a living, income coming in. And then he had 2 sets of children. He had 2 wives. And the other house went to the first set, and the 4th house went to the second set. So that's how he divided up in his will. It's there right in his will, how he divided up his estate. So it's real. It's still an ongoing thing to put flesh to these people. But like I say, one lady, Lucy, that came from Trinity, she was a vendor, and they had a Georgetown market, and her daughters, all of them were seamstress. So they sold wares and stuff in the market, and that's how a lot of the women were seamstress, and that's how they made their money and stuff. And you know, back in the day, they didn't have machines, so they doing all this stuff by hands and stuff. So we're not talking about, you know, easy living or easy jobs and stuff. But it has become very interesting because some of the people are related. Like I say, I was given a list, and then I found out that they related by their in-laws. You know, society. The church was their society. We didn't have movies or anything. So where do you find a wife? They found their wives in church. So she's on the list, but she's not listed as somebody's wife. And then, you know, I find the sisters and the brothers. So it's very interesting to me.
It's very interesting to us. I think, Bernie, you're next. I just got to say that what happens is you got to do some imagining. 15th and H is not that far from here. People walk back and forth. Every black Catholic knew one another. When you go a little bit further, you find that the founding folks of St. Augustine's had roots here, but some had roots over near St. Aloysius and over near St. Peter's. And by 30 years before Epiphany, they're breaking off of St. Peter's because a young white boy said when he got, when he got reassigned by the Archbishop back to Baltimore for being just a little too on the edge, he said, save your money, I'm coming back, we're gonna build us our own parish, and that was St. Cyprian's. And the guy who's got that history down pat is gonna give it to you now. And Bernie, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work you've done.
Thanks, Father. Thank you, Father. With regard to the issue of race, there are similarities and parallels in the history of a number of parishes in the District of Columbia and that segment of Virginia that had been part of the district from 1790 until 1846. In 1858, free blacks, repelled by the racism that they experienced at St. Matthew's, where they were forced to celebrate Mass in the basement, founded Martin de Porres, the first black Catholic parish in the district. The church was renamed St. Augustine's, and today St. Augustine's proudly calls itself the mother church of black Catholics in the United States. The decision of Trinity's black parishioners to establish their own church, Epiphany, in 1923 was preceded by the exodus of black Catholics from the other Washington parish staffed by the Jesuits. Blacks who attended St. Aloysius on North Capitol were dissatisfied with their segregated status in the church. In 1919, over 200 black Catholic families petitioned James Cardinal Gibbons to establish a church where they could practice their faith with acceptance and dignity. The Church of the Holy Redeemer on New York Avenue was dedicated in October of 1922. An earlier exodus of Washington black Catholics occurred in 1883. 1,500 black Catholic parishioners of St. Peter's on 2nd Street on Capitol Hill were repelled by the racism which they experienced at St. Peter's. They had not been allowed to attend Mass, have their children baptized, or celebrate marriage in the body of the parish church. They had been relegated to the basement of the church. They established St. Cyprian at 13th and C Streets. Black parishioners of St. Teresa of Avila in Anacostia in Southwest were compelled to attend Mass in the last 2 pews of the church, were excluded from any active role in the parish, were denied religious instruction for their children. In 1911, no longer willing to tolerate the discrimination to which they were subjected, they asked Cardinal Gibbon for permission to buy land and build their own church. In 1920, a formal procession marched from St. Teresa up the hill to lay the cornerstone of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. The new church was completed and dedicated in 1921. On the other side of the Potomac, the history of St. Mary in Alexandria has many parallels with Holy Trinity. St. Mary, like Holy Trinity, was founded by Father Francis Neal, our Jesuit founding pastor. Jesuits served as pastors of St. Mary until late in the 19th century. At St. Mary, blacks, free and enslaved, were forced to sit in a separate, segregated part of the church, raised galleries along both sides of the church. After the Civil War, as Jim Crow restrictions were imposed upon society, black Catholics in Alexandria were not even permitted to be married in the church. Their marriages were celebrated by the priest in the homes of black parishioners. By the beginning of the 20th century, a Josephite priest came every Sunday from Richmond to celebrate Mass for Alexandria's black Catholics in an alcove of the church. In 1914, a committee of black parishioners from St. Mary acquired land for a church at the corner of Wythe and North Columbus Streets in what was then a predominantly black section of Alexandria. Catherine Drexel, now canonized, contributed $8,000 toward the construction of the church. The remaining $4,000 was raised by the committee. St. Joseph's was dedicated in May of 1916. St. Joseph's first pastor lived in the church's sacristy until a rectory was built in 1921. This willingness to sacrifice characterized another Josephite, Father Bernard Lyons, who was pastor of Epiphany. Lyons lived in the church behind the sacristy until a rectory could be built. St. Joseph was the only Catholic church for black Catholics in Northern Virginia. In 1947, in response to the scandalous impediment to the practice of their faith, a committee of committed black Catholics founded Our Lady Queen of Peace in Arlington, the second Catholic church for African Americans in Northern Virginia. Perhaps priests and parishioners at the Washington area churches, which subjected black Catholics to a demeaning system of racial separation, or even excluded them, were oblivious to the structural evils of slavery, segregation, and racism, and the moral failures involved in participating in those structural evils, but they did participate in them. Thomas Merton reacted to the practices in the Diocese of Alexandria in Louisiana, where black Catholics could not attend white churches in areas that had a Catholic church for blacks. And if there was no church for blacks, blacks had to sit in a segregated section of the church and only receive communion after all of the whites had received the Eucharist. For Merton, this meant that the Eucharist, the sacrament of love that binds us together and manifests Christ's love for all humankind, had been weaponized as an instrument of disunity and hate, according to Merton, the ultimate blasphemy. St. Paul would have had something to say as well. After all, for him, charity was the prime virtue. Our past in Holy Trinity places a special obligation upon us as Catholic Christians to observe the primacy of charity, to love one another, and to strive actively for racial justice.
I'm reaching over here for a book. While all this was going on, you know McWhorter's book? He's a journalist, really. This is Red Summer. The summer of 1919, when all the black troops came back from World War I and found their way into this country, and Jim Crow just jumped off. Just landed, and everybody, the chapter in here on Washington is very much worth your while. I'm not going to say it has finessed historically or nuanced as it might be, but if you want to feel for what's going on in the time, in the neighborhoods and in the societies around the country, this little book says something about it. I got a book over there by John Thompson. Have you ever seen it? I Came as a Shadow. He did not want to go to the parish, Francis Xavier there. His father grew up in Compton. If you go down this river here to Newtown, St. Francis Xavier, where Richard Cellini says he thinks they found Thompson's great, I don't know how many, was baptized in 1804 in St. Francis, Newtown. When the Thompson family comes up here, they're looking for a church where they're not going to be in the back of the bus, and they end up at St. Augustine's. All this history is worth doing. There's a little book there about St. Augustine. Don't worry about it. There's Collins has written a history of Jesuits. My boy John Mudd just had Amazon print. He did what I'm trying to do, and I'll never know. It's this one right there. John Mudd came to St. Augustine. Some of you know John Mudd. He did a lot of stuff and worked with Ralph Keener, who I think was a saint. And he did good work. But this is, and with great joy. And the part about St. Augustine, I'm giving you this, Dina, for you all to share. All that being said,
I have a copy.
you got one already. Did he give you one?
No, he did not. I bought it.
See, we need to get closer, that's all. What I want to do is hear from you. What does all this mean as parishioners of Holy Trinity, as folks that have been around the country, as people who understand it? How does this hit you? Hi.
Microphone?
We need to get you a mic. There you go. Tell folks who you are, but you all know one another, just like all the black Catholics in D.C. know who they are. It's a large family. Go ahead.
Hi, Jean Johnson. I feel deprived. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a segregated neighborhood. I've lived in segregated neighborhoods all my life. And just this year with the Restorative Justice and Reconciliation, Bob Stump and others, I think we had a Zoom meeting one time. I'm getting them all mixed up because there's so much activity on anti-racism that I've forgotten exactly. But there was a man from St. Augustine and me that ended up in the same chat room. And we spoke about our upbringing and what our experiences were. And I fell in love with him in the 5 minutes that we were And I'm thinking, all of my life I have been segregated from these people, you know. And it's a deprivation in our life to have this have happened.
And there's a real reason why John Mudd would say joy is the product of coming to know a people that you didn't know growing up. There's something discoverable there, and a welcome and hospitality that's characterized by Black community generally, but Black parishes generally. It's very benedictive. Everybody come in, everybody hospitable. We all belong. You hear Francis talk todos, everybody in, all in. Well, St. Augustine's was all in free, and I'm not gonna go into chapter and verse of what that means, but you know what I mean when I say everybody was in that church, right? And everybody looked out for everybody else, regardless. And it's such a joy to really get to know. The question is, how can we get more chat rooms going? Other thoughts? Come on, somebody. Don't be afraid.
Hi. I have bad news. I adopted 2 Black children in D.C. and I live right near the church here, and so they grew up here. My daughter, the oldest, went to the upper school at Holy Trinity and was discriminated against in the school, and the parents, and they told me that they really, didn't want her in the school. However, I discovered that they let her in the school. She was the only Black student in the class, but they let her in the school because she was the one Black. And it benefited the school because they didn't have to let somebody from across town come and be the one Black student, so they could get somebody from the church. And so it's been difficult on that aspect, to have them in the church. And I think people should know that. That was going on, and all that anyway.
There was one Black in my class at Gonzaga, class 59, and I know we got some sense of what that's about. There's a lady sitting here who moved herself out of Georgetown to a couple different places and came back from South Carolina. She's on the board of John Carroll High School. She's never at a loss for words. Take this microphone, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, and tell them what you think. She's always looking for how to get contact score.
Well, so glad. I told Father Kemp I was coming up. I didn't hear from him for weeks, and yesterday, after 9 o'clock mass, bang, 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 like just be there. So
Tell them who you are.
my name is Emily Durso. I was baptized in this church. I went to Holy Trinity Grade School, Holy Trinity High School, and then my father was Italian, and he believed you stayed at home till you got married, so I went to Georgetown.
Microphone in front of your mouth.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear it now? Well, I'm finding this because it's so touching for me because I grew up at 27th and Q, so even though I was baptized here, we went to Epiphany. And I learned to play tennis with JoJo Dodson. Dr. Marshall was my doctor. Ms. Taylor at the park was my second mother. It's interesting because I grew up in a neighborhood that was half Black at the time. My school here was all white. But I was kind of oblivious about Epiphany. And Father Ball buried both my parents. But I remember, this is a silly little story, I'm a little kid, they raised some money for Epiphany, which I'm saying in the late 50s was half Black and half white. And I remember coming to church on Sunday, and they finished all the interior painting, and the statue of the Blessed Mother and St. Joseph, they were a little dark. And people were very upset, like, who painted these statues so dark? Like, I had no concept this was a Black church. And I didn't really know Father Ball was Black. I just had no idea. And when I went home, my parents were talking about it. I said, well, wonder why they did that. My father said, well, Father Ball is an African American and this is a Black church. Like, wake up. So, hearing all this is very touching. And the church was very kind to my family. My parents were ill, they were kind, my father was an usher. Father Ball came to the house to visit my father. It was a very, I went to school here for 12 years, but Epiphany was a very loving place where I didn't know I was white, and it didn't seem to matter. When you think about the history, there was a lot of pain there. And now I look back at all of my friends and realize they accepted me completely. But when I hear stories about your daughter not being accepted at Holy Trinity, I know that I was very blessed.
Any ideas? You're the idea woman. I got you up now for all that. No, I got you up for that. I love everything you just said.
Well,
Give some ideas of how we make some connections. You got a good idea about how John Carroll needs to make some connections with Georgetown.
exactly, and it's working, by the way.
Yeah, is it working?
Yeah,
There should be a direct path from John Carroll High School into Georgetown.
Well, I
University.
graduated from Georgetown, I love Georgetown, but I'm being very demanding of Georgetown. I'm insisting, and I have a little background in education, that they be connected to the last archdiocesan school in the city, which is 99% African American. And it's over in Northeast, and Georgetown's here. Right now, there's not a drop of connection. And it's the last Catholic archdiocesan high school that's not private. So I'm pushing them, and I think it's gonna work. Take students for dual enrollment. So our students can come here and take college level classes for free. And there's a very active, my old boss is Kai Henderson, and she's on the board. There's a very active Black Alumni Association, a Black Student Association, and I want those people to mentor these kids so they realize that this is part of their Catholic education. Because even today, it's still a very bifurcated city, and it's still a very bifurcated Catholic city.
Any ideas on the level, not just of Carroll and Georgetown, but on the level of folks that are adulting, Epiphany, Augustine's, Trinity? Any idea how to pull people together?
I'm very basic. I think proximity is everything. You know, you can sit in your church, you can sit in your church, you can sit in your church and have conversations, which is wonderful. People need to know history. But I think we should be going to St. Augustine. You know, St. Augustine should be coming to Holy Trinity. I think we need to start moving people around and mixing people around and having conversations in these places, because proximity is everything. History is a theoretical concept, but if you're trying to reach people's hearts, you have to have proximity and get to know people. They're getting to know some of you today, that's wonderful, but there's a whole world of people at Epiphany, and it's kind of sad to me there's only 2 of you still coming, but.
I gave out my mic, that gentleman right behind you.
Thank you, Father Kemp, ladies. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm Bob Stump. I have 2 ideas. One is, I haven't counted the house, but there are probably about 100 folks here in the room from Holy Trinity. How about each one of us talk to 2 people who weren't here today to hear this and tell the story that we have heard, so that we have more people in our church hearing the story, because we can be ambassadors for that. The second idea is, you know, some of us joined you last year, the Black Catholic History Mass that you had. When is that this year? What date?
That was just something because the Newman Club at Howard celebrated their 50th anniversary, so that was just for that occasion.
Okay, so it's not coming up this year?
No, we are doing the pilgrimage Friday back over to Mount Olivet, where we
Say
have
something about that, because you're all going.
Yeah, we're going. Some of us are going.
where a number of our founding members are, and we're going to section 61, where a number of people whose
She
graves
needs a mic.
Sybil does.
There's one on the altar.
Oh, I didn't.
You gonna talk about section 61?
You can talk about section 61. We have a large number of parishioners from St. Augustine's, founding members and their families buried at Holy Trinity. Our first pastor is buried there along with the housekeeper, and about how many graves? And about 18 graves right when you come in, as well as Professor John Esputa, who did the opera company and the Marine Band. They're all there together. And then throughout the cemetery, with 2 other sections, we have a large number of parishioners. So we're going over there for Veterans Day. A number of them fought in the Civil War. And also, it's, Black Catholic History Month, and a month that we remember those who are departed. But we're also going to visit section 61. And Sybil can tell you more about section 61 because she's been working with Paul and Peter on that aspect.
No, I learned about section 61 from either Bernie or Peter, it was in a footnote. There were 3 different cemeteries that came out of Holy Trinity. And Holy Rue is the 3rd one. But the second one was College Ground. And in 1950s, Georgetown wanted to build some more buildings. You know, y'all are landlocked here. So they claimed that they dug up it's between 500 and 1,000 graves. And there's no way they dug up all those graves because they only, in section 61, they only gave them three different grave sites. So you can't put up 500 people in 3. So Georgetown built buildings on top of graves. But we planned, and then they took them all the way in the back by West Virginia Avenue. And that's the other boundary of
Behind the hedge.
Well, it's right alongside where a lot of, the 59 is where a lot of blacks are, but 61, so they buried them back there. And so we plan on going.
But y'all are going Friday?
Yeah.
What time?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock at Meet at Mount Alton. You all have a pastor that loves to get up on cold Feast of All Souls Day and say Mass in Holy Rue. You all got some history there, right? In terms of this Sacred Heart of Plato where John Carroll was elected. They got some history that Wilton Gregory is very much involved with. They're raking up a lot of leaves. I'm not a cemetery guy. I am more of a, how do we do this?
I'm a cemetery person.
I understand. My mother was cemetery. My sister is. I get the cemeteries.
Father, can I say something? I think
Speaking of
Father
Mike.
was saying about the history program that was put on
Yes.
in the church last February.
Yes.
And we are going to have a history program this February with C.R. Gibbs.
Yes.
And he's one of the authors of the book, Black Georgetown Remembered.
He's the best, and you can pull him back into
I mean,
the
he
church.
knows, if there's anything to know about DC, he knows about it.
He's a guy. You want to say something, and then
Yes.
you want to say something, and we're going to quit.
Yeah, of course I have to leave. I have to get back to Epiphany, but thank you because you gave me a great memory because I do remember when our church was really, we had white parishioners that were part of the synodality and the whole 9 yards. I don't know if you remember Sarah McDonald, Patrick McDonald, well, those were my friends, and I lived on 27th Street, 27th and Dumbarton, so thank you for that.
27 too.
Okay, but to answer the question, how can we bridge the gap? Again, I want to thank you so much for having me. This has really been a great occasion for me. But I would like to invite each and every one of you that on the first Sunday of every month from October until May, please come and worship with us at the 10:30 Mass and join us for our church social, which happens every first Sunday. And that way you can get to see our church, talk to some of us, especially those of us that have been there a while, and get to meet some of our parishioners. So that's an open invitation. Thank you.
Where's your final resting spot?
My final address is Mount Olivet Cemetery. That's why I'm not ready to go over there just yet. Paul, I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you all very, very much. Thank these folks.